Hey there, welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Christy McDonald. Of all the states to make a case for their plans about jobs and the economy, both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have chosen Michigan. First, Trump tried to reset his campaign with a hard-hitting economic speech on Monday in Detroit at the Econ Club. And now Hillary Clinton speaking in Warren today about jobs and manufacturing to cement support from those Reagan Democrats in Macomb County. It's pretty significant for both campaigns to make statements here. We'll talk about why that is. Plus, Trump's reboot on Monday imploded with highly inflammatory remarks regarding Clinton and the Second Amendment. And a third party releases Clinton emails raising questions about the foundation and State Department overlap. We are going to start here tonight with our contributors. You know Nolan Finley from the Detroit News, and also joining us is Nancy Kaffer, columnist for the Detroit Free Press. She is in for Stephen Henderson, who is on vacation this week. It's great to have you back here, Nancy, as always.
It's great to be here, Christy.
All right, Nolan, let's start this off. You know, I thought we were just going to be able to sit here this week and talk about the economic plans from both of these candidates and size them up, and then everything just totally took a left turn, a right turn.
No, why would you ever think that?
You know what? Seriously, can't I just have one quiet week in the summertime? You know,
What would make you think anything was going to be normal this summer?
For commentary, can we just all gently beat our heads against the table? Is that acceptable?
I mean, seriously, you guys must be working.
guns.
You guys must be
Guns might be
working
more
overtime on the presidential cycle, because just when you think, well, we might want to just ease into this
Well,
week,
here's the thing, it
just
hasn't
totally
really,
changed.
it's not supposed to have really started yet. We're supposed to get to Labor Day before it kicks off.
Did you know that a man scaled Trump Tower with suction cups yesterday?
He got to the 21st floor.
We
That
are,
should be an
we are
Olympic
so
sport.
far off the grid here. Like, I don't even know what's going to happen
Shouldn't that be an
next.
Olympic sport,
It
though?
could be an
probably
Olympic
That looks
sport.
so much.
But they're not
That was,
airing it.
that was a lot more exciting to watch than gymnastics.
I mean, we could do some kind of correlation between the suction cup thing and the whole cupping therapy. I, mean,
I stayed at work for 20
athletes are
minutes.
doing.
I
That
stayed at
looks
work for
awful.
20 minutes. I didn't have to watch that guy climb that
You got
tower.
sucked in. That's like watching cat videos on YouTube, Nancy. All right. Let's start this off with, because we have a lot of time to talk about what's been happening with the presidential race. But I do want to start off first with the significance of Michigan and the fact that both candidates have chosen Michigan, of all places, to make their to kind of rebrand their economic pictures for the country. So let me start with you, Nolan, and tell me why Michigan. Why
Well,
did
you
they
know,
choose
that's a
here?
question I ask because, you know, I don't think Michigan is really a swing state. So there are other states that are more in play. And you would have thought, particularly for Donald Trump and for Clinton, if you're going to make announcements like this, you go to a Florida perhaps or a Pennsylvania or even in Indiana, a place that's in play. I don't think Michigan is in play this year, but in terms of economic issues, Michigan's been through it all over the years. And so I think they felt that this was a good place to talk particularly about manufacturing and business taxes and other things. But it is curious to me that they both chose Michigan instead of picking other states where that might do them more good.
Why do you think they did that, Nancy?
I mean, I agree. I don't think Michigan's in play. I think that if Michigan were in play, we would be seeing Hillary Clinton would have a lot bigger problems. But I think that one of the reasons we're seeing Michigan is because Detroit. Some people have this sort of, on the right side of the aisle, have this sort of Detroit fetish where they like to hold it up as this example of failed liberal and democratic policies. And we saw this in even Bernie Sanders bringing it up, pointing to NAFTA as the cause of Detroit's woes. And you know, if you look at Detroit's decline, it started right after World War II, and it had to do with companies spreading out to the suburbs. It had to do with federal housing policy designed to incentivize homeownership, but programs that kept African Americans out of homeownership, that depleted the tax base, both business and residential of the city. It started while Detroit still had Republican mayors, and continued during Detroit's famous 50 years of Democratic leadership. It's far more complex than saying liberal policies have failed Detroit, but because of Detroit's very high-profile fall, and then what we hope is comeback. I think that is part of the draw here, is to be able to point to Detroit and try to make some grand point about the economy.
It may be the trade issue too. I mean, both of them are basically preaching the same message on trade, and that's a message that resonates in a manufacturing, particularly an auto manufacturing state like Michigan. I mean, it's an ill-considered policy by both Trump and Clinton, but I think they thought that trade here And since trade was such a big centerpiece of both their talks were expected to be, that would play well.
I think it's interesting too that you make the point, Nolan, and I'm sure Nancy you would agree that Michigan is no longer a swing state. That the state hasn't voted for a Republican president since
1992.
Thank you. So the fact that Michigan's like, well, we could still be in play here is really not. It doesn't seem to be accurate.
No, I mean I don't think we're in play. I don't think that. I agree with Nolan. Watch out for the lightning. But
yeah, I was going to say I just wrote that down and the time that happened.
88. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 1992 was when we started going blue. We've gone blue in every election since 1992. Thank you, Nolan. Oh no, I totally lost my train of thought. But Detroit election. Nolan, you talk.
All right, no.
Well, I think our poll last week, and I think the subsequent Free Press poll confirms that. This isn't a swing state. Probably never was a swing state. We talked about this was going to be a swing state, Romney would have won it 4 years ago.
Absolutely, Romney homegrown.
And so he didn't. He didn't win it by a lot. And yet every year we start out with this. Michigan's competitive, and it's good for us to think that because we get a lot more attention, a lot more
ad time
and
too,
a lot more money spent.
And I think Sanders' victory in the Democratic primary here is fueling some of this belief here because Sanders did make this criticism that NAFTA had been, his supporters were tweeting this meme of showing an abandoned house in Detroit and saying this is what Hillary Clinton and NAFTA did for you, which is not. I mean, by the time NAFTA came around, Detroit was not really in the line here to be affected by it, but I think because that issue seemed to give Bernie Sanders some traction in the primary, I think that's probably fueling the idea that there is push here on this issue.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump and his speech at the Econ Club this week. Both of you were there. Nolan, talk to me a little bit about the atmosphere. I mean, much was made that this was a huge speech for Donald Trump to reset his campaign and to show I can be presidential performance out of him. What was your take from it?
Well, I mean, sitting there watching the speech, I mean, I think he hit his, aside from the particulars of the speech, some of which I agreed with very much, others I'm very much opposed to, but aside from the particulars of the speech, I thought he did a good job with composure, demeanor, tone. He wasn't, sort of off the cuff attacking. He needed to go in there and look presidential, and I think he accomplished that. And then, as always, when it comes to his resets, he walks off the stage, starts, making these wild off-the-cuff comments, getting on Twitter, and, and he gives back any advantage he might have gained, and he did that again this week.
I think because of confirmation bias, we see, and I have to compliment Nolan on a really great column this weekend where he talked about how the GOP has shifted away from what he and other real conservatives believe. I think that was a great column, Nolan.
Thank
you. Everyone should read it if they haven't already. But so we see though there are Republicans who have said to me, I just don't know what I'm going to do in this election. I want to believe he's going to settle down. He'll hire good people, and that Trump will be able to become presidential, and that this is sort of a persona, despite by this time so much evidence that's not really a credible scenario, and because of confirmation bias, which is the natural trait to weight information that confirms what you want to believe more heavily than information that contradicts what you want to believe. People will point to speeches like Monday's Econ Club speech and say, see, he's able to do it when he wants to, and look at things like Tuesday and say, that doesn't count. And so I think that there is a group of Republicans who will be, despite his returning to true form the day after, will find this reassuring.
I think it is interesting. They
I don't know how you make a case otherwise to those folks either.
I think you were talking about surrounding himself with people, and former Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers is one of those names that popped up. But then you have this whole group of people, 50 leaders that have come out, former CIA, and saying, look, this guy is not fit to lead.
Yeah, and I mean, you
no matter who you surround him with.
You have that growing feeling amongst the Republican establishment. I feel that same way myself. Haven't been shy about saying that, but the response from that column for me Sunday was very interesting. I got hundreds and hundreds of emails from people who say, I'm where you are. I can't vote for either one. We don't want to sit here and pretend it's only Republicans who are dismayed by this election. Tremendous number of Democrats wrote me as well saying, I just don't trust her. I can't vote for someone I don't trust. I'm going to sit it out. And I'm really thinking you're going to see a very low, perhaps not turnout at the polls, but a very low ballot casting on the presidential line.
What do you think that says, Nancy?
Well, I think we have to find out if that happens before I can have an opinion on it. I think that there is a lot. This is an election. I haven't seen as many elections as Nolan, but this is definitely an election unlike any in my lifetime. I mean, we're really in. The thing that concerns me the most about this election is we've had candidates. It's standard operating procedure for a candidate to say, the other guy's incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. I'm the one who can fix this. This is the other guy is
destroy
is a
the
mess.
country.
Right.
But that's standard. But to say the system is rigged, the system is corrupt, the country is this election is rigged. That's stuff that only Trump has. That's there. Even Richard Nixon, with his very law and order fear-mongering speech in '68, didn't say the country is corrupt and the system is rigged.
Well, maybe
But
we
don't
have
you
more
think that's-
confirmation bias there. If you listen to Elizabeth Warren and Hillary Clinton, and and the sort of increasing use of Nazi references that are creeping in, I think that's all very dangerous. I don't think there's a high ground in this election on either
Now,
side. It's low ground.
Bernie Sanders has said that the system is rigged, et cetera, and Elizabeth Warren, that's a different. I'm talking about a presidential candidate, someone who is in line to lead the country. And what concerns me about that is that in an outcome in which Donald Trump doesn't win, he has spent months telling his supporters that the election is rigged. What are they going to do? Are they going to accept the outcome as legitimate?
Well, don't you think that he's saying that as a shield, but he's going to lose?
Okay.
And then so he can't feel bad about losing because he was never going to win all along.
But the thing that I mean, sure, but what do his supporters think about that? Do they say, oh, he's saying that so he won't feel bad? Or are they saying, yeah, the system's rigged, and then if he loses, what do they do?
So then it speaks to how much do his supporters really believe what he's saying. And we
Well,
know that the
I don't think
exaggeration
that's fair.
factor runs high, and this goes directly to what he said the next day after he made his speech at the Econ Club and talking about the Second Amendment and Hillary Clinton. Was that a veiled threat? Was that just off-the-cuff speech? But does that
It's
make
what you never can tell. I mean, you can
exactly
never
to
tell
one
because-
person somewhere out in the country who takes it literally?
And we've had that sort of thing in the past on both sides. It's it's inappropriate, it's overheated rhetoric. But what the truth is here, with so many people voting against rather than for, no matter who wins this presidency, the president's going to come into the office lacking the majority support of the American people, probably going to get elected with less than 40% of the vote, and even that 40% of the vote that did vote for him and her, much of that was cast against the other person rather than for them. I don't see how you unite this country after this.
It's a pretty depressing thought.
I share that concern. I mean, you have a significant portion of the country that will not accept the outcome as legitimate, regardless of how it falls, and I think that puts us in, the one thing, one difference I think is that Hillary Clinton, whether you love her or hate her, is a nerd, and she's got detailed plans for basically everything. And I bet that somewhere she has a plan, whether it will be successful or not, for how she would unite the country. I don't think Donald Trump even thinks that way.
I have no
I
idea.
I don't think that's even something he thinks about. How will I unite the country? I don't know if she's going to be able to do it, but
these candidates are deeply flawed in different ways. I wouldn't agree that if you just look at her resume and experience, you'd say that's a qualified candidate. And then again, you have these more emails creeping out yesterday, showing that sort of ethical line she walks with the collusion between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department, in clear violation of the agreements that the ethical agreements the Obama administration put in place to guard against just this sort of thing. I mean, lobbying, you had the Clinton Foundation people lobbying the State Department on behalf of donors. The president was worried about this when he named her, and so he put these guidelines in place, and she completely blew by them from day one.
One thing that I want to look at side by side is in this election, people seem to have given Donald Trump a lot more credence when it comes to helping the economy and to growing the economy and bringing jobs, to America. He's done. That's the one place where it feels like he's done pretty well. What would Hillary Clinton's plans versus Donald Trump's plans look like, and how would that affect Michigan? Let me start with you, Nancy.
Well, one of the things we saw from Trump on Monday was he started off by kind of giving what sort of is a standard conservative stump speech. He's going to cut business taxes. He's going to freeze regulations. He's going to make it easier for people to start businesses. He didn't give really any details. He kept saying details. Details. We'll give you details in the coming weeks. It's like, well, the election is in the coming weeks, so let's get those details. But this is a very standard, very traditional sort of conservative side of the aisle promises. Then, toward the end of the speech, he started going into sort of this rapid-fire litany of policy things, and within the space of one or two sentences was like, we're going to improve law and order, and we're going to help with child care costs. I mean, it started off as a very more traditional kind of campaign speech and devolved into a very almost frenetic recitation of policy prescriptions. I don't think he provided enough detail to flesh out how any of those plans are gonna help Michigan.
What do you think, Nolan?
The speech got good marks from economists. I walked out with one of the automotive economists on Monday, and he said, it's a fine speech. It's everything we would want, except the trade stuff really concerns us. It really concerns me. One thing he didn't mention that I think is very important to Michigan and every other state, and she won't mention today, we tape before her speech obviously, is debt and deficit. And you have not heard that conversation throughout this campaign. And I think the American people are worried, or should be worried, that we continue to spend a third more than we take in this country. And nobody's talking about that. Instead, he proposed massive new spending programs. She'll propose massive new spending programs, all well and good, but you should lay out a plan, a real plan, beyond this fantasy that we're going to soak the rich, a real plan for paying for it. And we just keep proposing spending without proposing trade-offs, budget trade-offs.
Are you missing those details?
I think that I actually take a slightly different approach to this than Nolan. I think that debt is only one part of a fraction, and that one way to attack debt is to cut, but another way to attack debt is to grow the other part of the fraction. So,
that's true.
If your economy grows, and if the plans that you're putting in place that have an immediate cost result in economic growth that puts your debt into a stable situation, that's that's kind of the approach I'd
That's
prefer.
absolutely true. You can do that to a point, but you can't just keep spending. There's a limit to how much even growth can cover, and you have to remember we've got a tremendous amount, $20 trillion in debt we've got to address too, and I don't see enough growth in either one of these plans to cover the debt.
I also think that any kind of discussion of debt and budget cutting doesn't really lend itself to the campaign trail, because you can't say we're going to cut. We're going to cut Social Security. We're going to cut. You have to restructure things and be thoughtful about it, and that doesn't lend itself into the sort of quick statements that work well.
But you can say we are going to restructure our priorities. If we're going to do child care credits, American people may think that's a fine thing. What are we doing that we don't want to do anymore? That's responsible governing, and I think that's a powerful campaign message.
Let me ask you this: is the economy still, do you believe, the #1 issue on voters' minds?
Our readers said it was in the poll. I think it came out in yours too, didn't it?
What do you think?
I think it's hard to argue that it's never the top issue.
Right.
So no.
Well, in terms of national security.
Well, sure.
Yeah, and that's funny because you'd think with all that's happening in the world, national security would rise higher, but people are more concerned about their own household incomes.
The economy, stupid, right?
Well, it's, because there certainly are very real dangers in the world, but statistically speaking, it's very, very unlikely that they affect you personally. And so the challenges you deal with every day are far more real to you and important, and that's natural. And there's nothing wrong with that.
You're worried about your own bills and your kids' colleges.
And having a stable financial foundation is part of national security. It's the thing that everything flows from.
This is true.